Alright, so I'm here to talk to you today about The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask and how it relates to the Legend of Zelda timeline. Now, first off, let's consider about Termina. I have something that's very, very controversial to a lot of you, but I hold the opinion that Termina is geographically close to Hyrule. Now, my evidence for this is that Hyrule, if you remember, has mountains in the north, and Termina as well has mountains in the north. As you remember, the Gerudo Desert is in the west of Hyrule, and I believe, Incana Desert is in the east of Termina. So these geographic areas match up to one another. Furthermore, Lake Hylia is at the southern part of Hyrule, and that's a big body of water, as we can tell. Fresh water, may I remind you, from the mountains. And the swamp in the south of Termina would require a large freshwater source to provide all the abundant vegetation that it has. Therefore, it is possible for Termina to be west of Hyrule. Now, many of you will say that Termina is an alternate dimension that has no relation to the geography of Hyrule. But what evidence is there for this? Well, as far as I know, the only evidence given is from the official Zelda website, which lists it as such. However, we know from past experiences that developer quotes, back of boxes, instruction manuals, and websites all have been proven false at some point, and therefore the games are the only actual evidence that we can use for a solid basis of our hypotheses. Now that we have that out of the way, I will explain how Termina can be geographically in the same universe as Hyrule. Now, when you start Majora's Mask, Link is wandering the Lost Woods, looking for Navi. And it's said in a very roundabout way, but he is. And as we know from Ocarina of Time, the Lost Woods have the magical powers to transport people from the Lost Woods to places that are further away, such as Zora's Domain and Goron City. So, therefore, would it not be plausible for the Lost Woods to transport somebody to a place that is further away, possibly even in a place that would be considered a different area or country at the time? This is how Link got to Termina, but, as we know, he may or may not have stayed there, because the events of him are not known after the game has ended. However, it is notable that in The Wind Waker, there are an abundance of references to Majora's Mask. For example, the King of Red Lions, when describing the shattering of the Triforce of Courage, mentions that when the Hero of Time left Hyrule, he was separated from the elements that made him a hero, and thus the Triforce left him and shattered into its many parts. When Tetra is introducing Link to the Forsaken Fortress, she mentions that she has known that her ancestors have fought with the people who used to own the fortress a very long time ago. Now, of course, she being Princess Zelda in disguise, spoilers for those who haven't played, this means that she is of the Hylian race, and the Hylians' natural enemy, as seen in the games, is the Gerudo. And they had a pirate base in the western part of Termina, and therefore the Forsaken Fortress may be built upon the ancient ruins of that base. Working our way southeastern, we come to Tingle Island. Now, as you may remember, Tingle made his first appearance in Majora's Mask. He roamed about Termina selling maps to you. He appears again in The Wind Waker with a slightly altered function of translating ancient maps from ancient Hylian into current Hylian. We do not know how he does this, but he does through the use of magic words. This island is located in between the Forsaken Fortress, which we presume is the western pirate base, and Windfall Island, which I shall get to in a moment. But essentially, it could be surmised that Tingle Island is based off of possibly wherever Tingle resided in Termina a long time ago. Now moving on to Windfall Island. Windfall Island's most notable feature is the lighthouse. Once you get it running, you will be able to see Windfall Island from night or day, from a long distance away. I think it's even visible from Tingle Island, which is 2 map squares away. Much like the clock tower in Termina, how you could see it from almost every single part of Termina. The geography from within the 2 cities themselves resemble each other if you were to take the western part of one city and make it the eastern part of another and the northern part and the southern part in another. As you remember, the western part of Clocktown has a row of buildings and shops that eventually meet into a plaza-like area, and the east part of Windfall Island is the same. They both even slope upwards from south to north. The southern part of Windfall Island is a field area resembling the northern part of Clocktown. The main social hub of Windfall Island is the north and west part of the city, and much like the southeastern part of Clocktown. Many people will say that Windfall Island is actually Kikaria Village from Hyrule. However, if you remember the geography of Hyrule, Kikaria was southeast of Hyrule Castletown, and Hyrule Castle is north of Hyrule Castletown. And in the Wind Waker, Hyrule Castle is underneath the Tower of the Gods, and the Tower of the Gods is south of Windfall Island, which would mean that Kikaria would have had been moved roughly, from the southeast to the north, which probably didn't happen. The 3 islands that I have talked about thus far, I will refer to as the Termina part of the Wind Waker map. The Hyrule part of the map, as you might guess, might be things like the Tower of the Gods and Forest Haven, things that bear obvious resemblances to the places that they were based on in Ocarina of Time. But first, a quick note about the Rito. Many people say that the Rito came from the Gorons, or that they came from the Zoras, or something similar. However, there are Gorons in-game in the Wind Waker, which means that they probably didn't come from the Gorons. And furthermore, if the Great Sea is composed of both Termina and Hyrule, we know that there was a type of Zoras in the western part of Termina that lived in the sea, and therefore if those Terminan Zoras flourished in this new Great Sea, and they've probably just been, exploring the great vastness of the underwater world. And lastly, the greatest piece of evidence that I have in my arsenal is in the Forest Haven, which, as I may remind you, is based off of the Lost Woods by the obvious presence of the Deku Tree. Now, within the Nintendo Gallery, which may I remind you is canon because it is in-game, if you look behind Karlov's counter on the left wall, you will see various masks. You will see things like the Running Mask and the Goron Mask, which both appeared in Ocarina of Time, as well as in Majora's Mask, which means that they could have just been in Hyrule to begin with the Happy Mask salesman, and whoever Link delivered those to. But there is also the All Night Mask, and the All Night Mask only appeared in Majora's Mask, and therefore it would have to, get in a crate or something, and then float its way along to the Lost Woods, which it couldn't do if Termina was in a parallel universe. There are also other islands that bear some resemblance to places in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. For example, there's the island that is a volcano that you have to freeze with an ice arrow to get some item that I forget. This bears a resemblance to Death Mountain, how it also was a big volcano, and it's in roughly the right place for it to be Death Mountain, but there's no actual evidence for that. Also, the Link's Oasis, I believe it's called, the Kanaba place, is roughly in the same place where Kikaria Village would be. Now, as far as on the Terminen side, there's not as many direct relations, but there is a mountainous temple. I believe it's the Temple of Wind, I think, or the either you bring Maka or Medley to it, I forget which one, but it does have some resemblance to the other set of mountains in Termina. Well, that's it for this part and how I compared Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask to the Wind Waker. Join me in the next part while I will compare Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, but mostly Majora's Mask, to Twilight Princess. Alright, good day.